finding out the man who raised you isn't your real dad completely rewrites your existence. But finding out he forged a DNA test to frame your late mom, that kind of betrayal changes you forever. There's this weird kind of shame when a parent manipulates you that deeply. You feel so foolish for trusting them, and honestly, you feel completely alone. I'm finally sharing this because I know how terrifying it is to shatter their false narrative. To understand how he could do this, you gotta understand my family dynamic. My grandpa, Elias, was an absolute force of nature. He built this massive chain of hardware stores totally from scratch. He was sharp, deeply principled, and had zero tolerance for laziness. He truly believed that respect and wealth were things you had to earn through sweat and integrity. My dad was the exact opposite. He was the kind of guy who wanted the penthouse view without ever climbing the stairs. He spent his whole life chasing these flashy get-rich-quick schemes that always fell apart. For years, he bled my grandpa dry for endless loans and bailouts. Grandpa loved him, but he wasn't blind to the hustle. Eventually, he completely cut my dad off financially. My dad deeply resented him for it, feeling totally entitled to the empire. But I adored my grandpa. We had this incredibly close bond that my dad always seemed kind of jealous of. My mom was the only one who kept the peace. She was endlessly patient and always smoothed over my dad's massive ego. She documented everything we did in these beautiful old journals. But we lost her to cancer when I was just 19. Her death completely shattered me, and it fractured whatever foundation our family had left. After that, my dad just became even more distant. Fast forward 7 years, I was 26, working as a designer and visiting my grandpa every Sunday. Then suddenly, his heart gave out. Losing him felt like losing my only anchor to the world. At the funeral, I noticed something way off about my dad. He didn't look like a guy mourning his father at all. He was pacing around, super anxious, constantly checking his phone. I figured he just couldn't process it, but man, I was so wrong. A week before the official reading of my grandfather's will, my dad called me out of nowhere. He said it was super urgent and that it had to do with my mom. When I opened my apartment door for him, he looked absolutely shattered. He walked inside, slumped down on my sofa, and just buried his face in his hands. Honestly, it was a performance that deserves an Academy Award. He took this deep, shaky breath, acting like the weight of the world was crushing him. With fake tears in his eyes, he reached into his briefcase. He slowly pulled out this manila envelope and set it down on my coffee table. He told me he'd been hiding something for 26 years, and I had to know before the lawyers got involved. My hands were literally shaking as I reached for it. I opened the envelope and pulled out a single piece of paper with a medical clinic's letterhead. It was a paternity test. I just stared at the bold black text near the bottom of the page. The words kind of blurred together before finally hitting me. Probability of paternity, 0%. All the air just left my lungs and the room started spinning. My dad reached out, grabbed my hand, and told me this devastating story. He claimed that right before I was born, he and my mom had secretly separated, and she had an affair. I was sobbing uncontrollably. It felt like my entire identity was just crumbling beneath me. I felt like a total fraud, like a stranger in my own life. But right when I was at my lowest, the real manipulation started. His voice dropped to this soft, pleading whisper. He told me my grandpa's will had a strict biological bloodline clause in it. He said if the lawyers found out I wasn't blood, I'd lose the inheritance and the whole scandal would become public record. He looked me dead in the eye and said he couldn't bear to see my mom's memory dragged through a messy legal scandal. He told me there was only one way to protect her. I had to voluntarily sign away my portion of the estate before the will was read. He weaponized my love for my mom and my grief. He left the papers next to the DNA results and kissed my forehead. He told me to take a few days, but reminded me the deadline was coming fast. Those next 3 days were the darkest of my life. I didn't eat or sleep. I just sat on my floor, surrounded by old photo albums, staring at pictures of my mom. I tried to match the saint I remembered with this secret life. I felt completely disconnected from my own body. I remember standing in front of the mirror, just staring at my reflection. I was literally trying to find the features of a total stranger in my own face. Everything I knew about myself was gone. I was fully prepared to sign the papers. I sat there with a pen, ready to walk away from everything, just to protect my mom's name. But then this quiet little voice of intuition kicked in. The exact voice toxic people train you to ignore. Something just felt off. It started with my dad's behavior. For a guy who just dropped world-shattering news, he was incredibly impatient. He wasn't checking in to see if I was okay. He was only texting to ask if I'd signed the document yet. When I told him I needed more time, his tone got really sharp. He accused me of being selfish, saying I was dragging my feet. Realizing the pattern, it was the exact same aggressive tone he used whenever his shady business deals were falling apart. So I started looking way closer at the DNA test. The clinic logo was real, but the formatting was super weird. And then I noticed the patient ID number. Instead of a normal medical code, it was formatted exactly like a date. October 14th, 1996. That specific date triggered a memory. I immediately went to my closet and dragged out this heavy plastic storage bin. It had all of my mom's old belongings in it, the stuff I just couldn't bear to part with after she passed away. My mom documented absolutely everything. I frantically dug through the stack of keepsakes until I found her journal from 1996. That was the exact year my dad claimed they were separated and she had an affair. I had to know the truth. I flipped the pages to October, and guess what? There was no separation. Instead, she wrote in crazy detail about a road trip they took together. On October 14th, she pressed a red maple leaf into the pages, writing about how lucky she felt. There was no affair. The whole story was a complete lie. My heart started hammering in my chest. If the story was fake, then the test was fake. He was trying to steal my inheritance by erasing my existence. I knew I couldn't confront him right away. If I tipped my hand, he'd just gaslight me and make me look crazy. I needed undeniable proof. So I went online and ordered a rapid turnaround DNA test. When the kit arrived, I didn't waste a second. I swabbed my cheek and paid for overnight shipping. I knew this test would destroy his web of lies. Next, I called the medical clinic listed on the forged document. I played down. I told the receptionist I needed a digital copy of my records. I read her the exact date and patient ID from the paper. She put me on hold for 10 agonizing minutes. When she came back, she sounded totally confused. She said their system didn't even use that format for patient IDs. They had absolutely no record of us ever being patients there. The document was completely fake. He probably photoshopped it himself.
While I waited for my DNA results, I needed to understand his motive.
So I called my grandfather's estate lawyer, Mr. Vance, for a private meeting.
Sitting in Mr. Vance's oak-paneled office, the final pieces fell into place. He was a stern, meticulous guy. I told him I needed to understand the exact terms of the trust. Mr. Vance explained the reality of the estate.
My grandpa knew my dad would squander the business on bad investments.
So he bypassed him almost entirely. He left the massive estate in an ironclad trust, solely in my name. But there was a catch. If I legally renounced my claim, the trust would dissolve and default to my dad. Mr. Vance mentioned my dad had been calling his office relentlessly. He kept asking how an heir renounces their claim.
The betrayal was so deep, it made me physically sick.
He wasn't trying to protect my mom's memory.
He was trying to rob me of my future because he was broke.
His latest venture had imploded, and he was facing imminent bankruptcy. 2 days later, the notification finally popped up. I was sitting alone in my apartment, just staring at the screen. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely tap the app to open it. The results loaded in undeniable digital ink. I matched with my aunt and uncle on my father's side. The screen confirmed I shared 50% of his DNA. I was his biological daughter. The reality of what he did crashed over me. He looked his own flesh and blood in the eye, watched me cry, and handed me a forged document. He was willing to ruin my life for a payout.
The day of the official will reading finally arrived.
We were scheduled at Mr. Vance's office at 10, but I got there early. I was dressed sharply, holding a sleek black leather folder with everything I needed. Sitting alone at that massive mahogany table, I didn't feel like the shattered girl from a week ago. I felt entirely numb, replaced by a cold, calculating clarity. I was done being his victim. My father walked in exactly 10 minutes later. He wore a tailored suit, playing the part of the grieving son perfectly. But as he got closer, I saw the faint sheen of nervous sweat on his brow. He pulled out the heavy leather chair and sat right next to me. He gave me a somber, paternal smile that didn't reach his eyes and patted my knee. It was the exact same manipulative affection. He leaned in close, his voice dropping to a whisper dripping with fake sympathy. He asked if I brought the paperwork to hand to Mr. Vance. He said it was the only way to protect my ma. I turned my head and really looked at him for the first time. I saw the desperate greed hiding just behind his eyes. I saw the absolute emptiness of a man who viewed his child as a payout. I didn't shrink away from his touch, and I didn't break eye contact. I rested my hand flat on the sleek leather folder. With a completely steady voice, I told him that I brought the paperwork. Right on time, Mr. Vance walked in and took his seat at the head of the table. He opened his file, completely unaware of the bomb that was about to go off. Before Vance could even get a word out, my dad cleared his throat and interrupted. He put on this terribly burdened voice, telling the lawyer I had a voluntary renunciation to submit. Mr. Vance stopped dead in his tracks. He peered over his glasses at me, looking genuinely shocked, and asked if it was true. I didn't miss a beat. I just looked right back at him, said I did have some paperwork, and unzipped my folder. I didn't pull out his stupid renunciation form. Instead, I slid the fake DNA test across the table and announced exactly what it was. I made sure my voice echoed in that quiet room. All the color instantly drained from my dad's face. He opened his mouth to try and spin it, but absolutely nothing came out. Then I slid the second document right next to it. I told them it was my commercial DNA results, officially proving I was his biological daughter.
Mr. Vance just stared at the papers.
You could see the gears turning in his head as the reality of the fraud set in. Finally, I dropped the third document on the table. It was the letter from the clinic, legally confirming they had no record of us and the ID was totally fabricated. The silence in that office was deafening. The slick, confident businessman was completely gone. He was just a cornered animal who knew he was finally caught. He started stammering, his face turning this dark, angry red. He tried to tell the lawyer I was just confused and highly emotional. But the slick businessman routine was completely dead. I cut him off right there. I told him I was absolutely lucid, and I knew he was drowning and dead. I laid it all out. He tried to erase my identity for a paycheck. That's when he completely snapped. He slammed his hand on the table and started screaming at me. He yelled that he raised me, that the money belonged to him and that I owed him. He was screaming, but I didn't even flinch. I just sat there and watched him completely unravel. It was honestly pathetic. All the fear he used to make me feel just evaporated. Then Mr. Vance finally spoke up. His voice was dangerously calm. He looked right at my father and told him that defrauding a beneficiary was a severe criminal offense. He threatened him with prison. The threat of jail time froze him instantly. Suddenly, the fake tears came rushing back. He reached out his hand, begging me to help him because he was about to lose everything. I pulled my hand back like he was on fire. I told him I was his daughter last week, when he watched me cry over his lie. He lost everything the second he handed me that envelope. I didn't even look at him after that. I turned to Mr. Vance and told him to proceed with the will exactly as my grandfather intended. I accepted my inheritance in full. He was asked to leave the office right then and there. He stumbled out the door, looking like an absolute ghost. That was the very last time I ever spoke to him. The aftermath was messy, but Mr. Vance helped me secure the trust. I took over my grandfather's estate and stepped right into his shoes. I made sure the legacy he built was completely protected. The aftermath was messy, as these things always are. True to his word, Mr. Vance helped me secure the trust. We spent hours going over the final paperwork. I officially took over my grandfather's estate. It was a lot to handle at first, honestly. But I hired competent managers to run the businesses. I wanted to make sure the legacy he built was protected. He worked way too hard for it to just fall apart. I finally felt like I was making him proud. Meanwhile, my father's financial world completely collapsed. Without the bailout he was banking on, he had nothing left. He filed for bankruptcy 2 months later. He tried to reach out to me through relatives. When that didn't work, he started flooding my inbox. Just long, rambling emails at all hours of the night. His messages were completely unhinged. They'd swing wildly between these fake apologies and furious demands for money. He still thought I was going to cave. I just sat there, staring at the screen. He wasn't sorry for what he did to me. He was just sorry he lost his payout. So I blocked his number. I blocked his email, and I cut all contact. I just completely shut the door on him. Setting that boundary was the hardest thing I've ever done. People tell you that family is everything, right? That you should always forgive and forget. But honestly, it was the most liberating thing I have ever experienced. I was finally free from his manipulation. I could actually breathe again. I still miss my grandfather every single day. His absence is something I've just had to learn to live with.
But being in his old office makes me feel like he's still around.
And I miss my mom, too.
More than words can really say.
Her journal is my favorite thing in the world now.
It reminds me of who she really was.
For a while there, I didn't even know who I was.
But when I look in the mirror these days, I definitely don't see a stranger staring back at me. I'm not that terrified girl anymore.
The one who almost threw her entire life away just because she felt guilty.
It's crazy how guilt can make you shrink yourself.
Now I see my grandfather's resilience in myself.
I've got his stubbornness, his drive, and his refusal to quit. I'm running this place exactly how he taught me. I also see my mother's true heart, her kindness, her patience, and her ability to find peace. I'm finally letting myself feel that peace again, after everything that happened. But the most important part?
I see a woman who finally learned how to stand up for herself. Someone who won't ever let herself be pushed around again.
I'm sharing all of this for a reason. If you're listening to this right now and you're stuck, say you're in a situation where someone is totally manipulating your reality. Maybe they're twisting the truth to make you look like the bad guy. Or worse, they're using your love and your empathy against you. It's an incredibly lonely place to be. But please, you've got to know this. You are not crazy. Your gut is telling you the truth, even if they're telling you lies. Don't let them make you doubt yourself. It's so easy to feel like you're the one tearing the family apart. But you are never selfish for demanding the truth. And you are absolutely not wrong for walking away, especially from people who only value you for what they can extract from you. Setting that hard boundary was terrifying at first, but honestly, it was the most liberating choice I've ever made in my entire life. People will tell you that family is everything, that you just have to forgive and forget, no matter how badly they treat you. But sometimes the people who share your blood are the ones most willing to bleed you dry. You have to protect yourself. So trust your intuition. When something feels off, listen to that quiet voice in the back of your mind. It's trying to save you. Guard your peace with absolutely everything you have. Don't ever let anyone make you feel guilty for simply surviving their toxic behavior. I refused to let his greed rewrite my history. And I definitely wasn't going to let him ruin my future. Because the very moment you stop accepting their twisted version of the story, that is the exact moment the illusion shatters. That is the moment you finally take your life back. And trust me, the life waiting for you on the other side is beautiful.